The year was 2052, and Basin Ridge was a monument to thirst. Terra had tilted, just slightly, on its axis of priorities. While the news feeds, buzzing static in every peripheral settlement, screamed about the glitter of the interstellar frontier, here the dust ruled. It was a fine, rust-colored powder that coated everything. A shroud for the cracked earth, where agriculture had officially surrendered 12 years prior. Rowan Hale, a man etched by his early 40s, rather than softened by them, knew the dust intimately. He tasted it in his sealed water, felt its grit in the joints of his atmospheric harvester, and saw it as the final, patient victor. He was, by trade, an agro-engineer. It was a title that carried a bitter irony in a place where nothing grew except irradiated tumbleweeds and debt. His real job was palliative care for machines. He kept the great, skeletal atmospheric water harvesters relics of a failed green initiative from collapsing. He patched their condenser fins, realigned their moisture capture lattices, and placated the nutrient-starved microbial filters that did the heavy lifting. He was a handyman for a dying ecosystem, paid in fractional water credits by settlers, too stubborn to leave, or too poor to be relocated to the gleaming, vertical garden cities. Those cities, the urban blocks, shimmered on the far horizon at dusk. They were vertical forests of steel and glass, self-contained biospheres where the air was clean and the water flowed from recycled fusion steam. Out here, in the peripheries, the world was flat, brown, and managed. Managed, chiefly, by the Extraterritorial Security Bureau. The ESB's drones, sleek black teardrops, were a constant feature of the sky, their optical sensors policing the quiet desperation. The ESB managed contact, managed resources, and, most of all, managed information. Above them, orbiting unseen, the Interspecies Treaty Council dictated the terms of trade, ensuring humanity did not embarrass itself in the new interstellar marketplace. Rowan Hale lived apart from all of it, in a reinforced stabilization shed 5 kilometers outside the nearest settlement cluster. He preferred the company of dying machines to the chatter of the frontier. His solitude was a fortress, built brick by brick over a decade. Few knew his history. The name Rowan Hale was registered, his biometrics logged, but his past was a carefully corrupted file. Only whispers remained of the brilliant biosystems architect at Blue-Green Anchorage, the man who had designed entire ecosystems, who had vanished overnight after the disaster they still called a containment failure, the one that had cost hundreds of lives and buried his own beneath the rubble of guilt. His world was small, defined by the whine of his tools and the precise calibration of humidity sensors. Until the night the sky tore open. It was not a rainstorm. Basin Ridge had not seen one of those in 8 years. It was a dust storm, a red wall event, rolling in from the high desert. The sky turned a bruised purple, then a suffocating, impenetrable black. The wind screamed, carrying sand sharp enough to etch glass. Rowan was securing the primary reservoir, a high-capacity microbial tank that served his small cluster of clients, when the localized atmospheric sensors went insane. It was not the wind. It was an ion spike, a massive, localized discharge that did not match any weather pattern. It was sharp, vertical, and then gone. He sealed the reservoir hatch, his goggles opaque with grit. He nearly stumbled over the first one. It was not human. He knelt, wiping his goggles clear. The figure was adolescent, humanoid, but built with an impossible avian grace. The skin, where it was not caked in mud and dust, had a faint, pearlescent shimmer, like the inside of an abalone shell. The figure was unconscious, its breathing a shallow, rasping click. It was dying. He saw the other two then, half buried in a fresh drift of dust near the reservoir's overflow pipe. 3 of them, teenagers, by their slight frames. Their clothes were simple, woven tunics that seemed to be organic, now stiff and cracked with dryness. They were desperately, catastrophically dehydrated. Rowan's blood went cold. He scanned the swirling dark. No ship, no wreckage, no impact crater. Just that lingering, ozone-sharp scent of the ion discharge. A footprintless arrival. The ESB protocols were seared into his brain. Report all non-designated biological contact. Do not engage. Do not contaminate. Await containment team. Failure to comply meant a mandatory sentence at the Grey Frost station. No trial. He looked at the face of the closest one. The pearlescent skin was dulling, tightening over the delicate bones. A faint clicking sound came from its chest. It was the sound of lungs collapsing from dryness. "Damn it," Rowan Hale whispered into the wind. He could not leave them to be sandblasted into jerky. He could not call the ESB, who would treat them like hazardous material, hosing them down with sterilizing agents before vivisecting them in a quarantine lab. He acted. His movements were precise, economical, betraying a competence far beyond that of a simple harvester mechanic. He lifted the first one. It weighed almost nothing, as if its bones were hollow. He carried the alien, shielding it with his own body, back to his stabilization shed. The shed's filters kicked into overdrive, scrubbing the air as the inner door hissed shut, sealing them from the storm and, more importantly, from the sky. The shed was shielded. Its thick, mycelial composite walls dampened thermal and biological signals, a necessity for his more sensitive culture work. He went back twice more, fighting the wind, his muscles burning. He laid the three side by side on the clean, sterile floor of his small workshop. They were Thrix. He recognized the species from restricted ISTC briefings that had leaked onto the dark feeds years ago. Reclusive, empathic, fragile, highly susceptible to atmospheric contaminants and dehydration. What were they doing here? He did not waste time on the question. He had, perhaps, an hour. His shed was dominated by a large, cylindrical tank, his personal microbial greenhouse. It was where he cultivated the specialized fungal and bacterial colonies that filtered the water. He recalibrated the tank's environment, flushing the nutrient-rich water and replacing it with a pure, hyper-humidified saline mist. He lowered the ambient temperature to match their likely core needs, one by one. He placed the three Thrix teenagers inside the sealed tank. They lay on the sterile mesh platform, their limbs frail. He initiated the sequence. The mist filled the chamber, thick as fog. It was not for breathing. It was for absorption, transdermal hydration. Their pearlescent skin was porous, designed to drink moisture directly from the air. He watched through the thick plexiglass, his face grim. For 10 minutes, nothing happened. Then, the skin of the first one seemed to ripple. The pearlescent quality returned, faint at first, then stronger, catching the glow of the tank's indicator lights. The rasping click in its chest eased, becoming a smoother, trilling sound. Rowan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. He sat down heavily on his workbench, the adrenaline leaving him shaky. He had just committed a Class 1 interspecies crime. He stayed there for hours, watching the storm rage outside on his monitors, and the three aliens stabilize within the mist. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world scoured clean and bathed in a harsh, bright light. Inside the tank, the three Thrix were awake. He cracked the seal. The humid air spilled out, smelling of ozone and wet stone. The three sat up, looking at him. Their eyes were large, liquid black, without pupils. They were afraid. But the fear was overshadowed by a profound, cellular exhaustion. Rowan kept his distance, hands open and visible. He pushed a tray towards them. On it were 3 standard-issue industrial protein bars and a bulb of his own cultivated microbial greens, a gelatinous, bright green cluster of engineered algae. The tallest one, who Rowan guessed was male, reached out a long, four-fingered hand. He touched the protein bar, then recoiled, hissing softly. He looked at his companions, a female and another, smaller male, and made a series of sharp, bird-like gestures. The female pointed at the reservoir tank visible through the shed's main viewport. Then she pointed at Rowan. She touched her own chest, over her heart, and bowed her head. The smaller male, bolder, crept forward. He picked up the cluster of microbial greens. He sniffed it, his delicate, slit-like nostrils flaring. He broke off a tiny piece and placed it in his mouth. His black eyes widened slightly. He trilled, a low, musical sound, and began to eat the rest with deliberate, grateful motions. Rowan felt a knot unwind in his stomach. He slid the other two clusters of greens toward them. "Water," Rowan said, pointing to the tank. "Shelter." He tapped the floor. "Safety." The three exchanged glances. The tallest male repeated the gestures. He pointed at the water, then at Rowan, then at his own chest. His expression was unreadable, but the gesture was not. Water. You. Life. The fragile piece was broken by a proximity alert. Rowan's head snapped to the monitor. A heavy tread transport vehicle was churning up the dust track to his shed. The ID beacon was one he knew well, Brent Calder, regional representative for the Synoptic Water Energy Consortium. "Stay back," Rowan said to the Thrix, using a sharp, placating gesture. He hit the opacity control for the greenhouse tank, turning the plexiglass an opaque white, hiding them from view. He stepped outside, squinting into the morning glare, just as Brent Calder's pristine, climate-controlled vehicle hissed to a stop. Brent emerged, a stark contrast to the landscape. He was immaculate in a gray corporate utility suit, his face smooth, his smile practiced. Brent did not just sell water. He sold the fear of not having it. His consortium owned the desalination plants, the primary aquifers, and the atmospheric generator patents. His profit margins were directly proportional to the panic level in the peripheries. "Rowan," Brent said, his voice offensively cheerful. "Quite a night. My sensors went haywire. You get any damage?" "Just the usual grit in the gears." "Brent, what brings you out running low on desperate customers?" Rowan's humor was as dry as the riverbeds. Brent laughed, a polished sound. "Always the comedian. I was checking the grid. My long-range thermal scanners picked up some anomalies right over your position. 3 distinct biological signatures, non-human, flared up and then vanished about 8 hours ago." Rowan's heart hammered, but his expression remained flat. "Must be your expensive toys acting up in the ion storm. I was busy wrestling a loose condenser coil. You know how they get." Brent's smile did not waver, but his eyes were sharp. He looked past Rowan at the shed. "Of course. It is just that anomalies make the settlers nervous. Nervous people pay premiums for guaranteed water contracts. But hidden anomalies," he tapped his temple, "they make the ESB nervous. And the ESB can shut down an entire quadrant. That is bad for business." "I am not hiding anything, Brent. Just trying to keep the filters from choking." "Good, good," Brent said. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. "But if you did see something, Rowan, information is a commodity, just like water." "I know you are running a deficit on your water credits. 3 months. Is it a confirmed report of unsanctioned bioforms, filed exclusively through me? Could wipe that debt clean. Think about it." Rowan held his gaze. "I do not install water meters on my conscience. Brent, I have got work to do." Brent's smile tightened. "Your choice. Just remember who keeps the main lines flowing." He gave a lazy salute, climbed back into his transport, and drove away, leaving a plume of perfect, settled dust. Rowan returned to the shed, his jaw tight. He knew what Brent was doing, laying a trap. Brent wanted there to be an alien threat. Fear sold contracts. He looked at the opaque tank. This was complicated. He needed help. But not from the ESB, and certainly not from Brent. He needed someone who understood the science and kept her mouth shut. He moved to his private, shielded comm unit, a relic he had built himself. He punched in an encrypted audio-only code. It chimed twice before a woman's voice answered, crisp and wary. "Rowan, this is irregular. Is the soil project compromised?" "Hello, Dr. Park," Rowan said, his voice low. "Not the soil, something else. I have a contamination issue. Fungal. You could say. 3 samples. Very delicate. They seem to have fallen." There was a long silence on the line. Dr. Helena Park had been his mentor at Blue-Green Anchorage, a true genius in regenerative biology. She was the only person alive who knew why he had really left. "Rowan, what have you done?" she finally asked, her voice tight with concern. "The right thing, I think. Or the stupidest. They are Thrix, Helena, alive. But they are not safe. Calder's sensors picked up their arrival." "Brent Calder," she hissed. "That man would bottle his own grandmother's tears and sell it as a luxury beverage. You cannot keep them. Rowan, the ESB will crucify you." "I know. I need to know where they came from. They are running from something. There was no ship. I will check the orbital arrays for any unscheduled descents," she said. "Do not move them. Do not talk to them. And Rowan, scrub your shed's thermal signature. Brent will be watching." "Already on it. Thank you. Helena." He cut the connection. He felt a sliver of relief, quickly eclipsed by the sheer impossibility of his situation. He was so focused on calibrating the thermal baffles, routing his shed's heat signature through an old, abandoned prospecting tunnel, that he did not hear the second, quieter vehicle approach. This one was an official ESB electric skimmer, sleek and silent. A young woman stepped out. She wore the severe black uniform of the ISTC Diplomatic Corps, but her ESB escort tags marked her as high clearance. She was Nadia Kim, a name Rowan recognized from the feeds. A rising star in the Diplomatic Corps, known for her sharp mind and even sharper adherence to protocol. She was not supposed to be here. Basin Ridge was a bureaucratic dead end. Nadia had a datapad in her hand and a skeptical expression on her face. She had been tasked with a routine audit of peripheral settlements, a punishment assignment, she was sure, for her last argument with her superior. Her day had been a monotonous series of dust-choked interviews with settlers. She had been on her way back to the regional outpost when her comm unit chimed. It was an anonymous flag, routed through a public channel, a fragment of an audio call, automatically tagged by the Extraterritorial Security Bureau monitoring system. The keywords, Thrix, alive, and Calder, had been enough to divert her. The call had been traced to this location. Rowan Hale, agro-engineer. File notes, non-communicative, minor debt, ex-Blue-Green Anchorage. The last part made her pause. She found Rowan Hale exiting the shed, his face smudged with thermal paste. "Mr. Hale." "Nadia." Kim's voice was polite but carried the effortless authority of the urban blocks. Rowan froze. This was worse than Brent. The ESB was bureaucratic, but the Diplomatic Corps was smart. "Ma'am, you are a long way from the city. Lost." "I am conducting an inspection of ESB sensor grid compliance," Nadia said smoothly, though her eyes were scanning everything. The shed, the oversized power conduits, the fresh tracks from Brent Calder's vehicle. "We received reports of sensor anomalies in this sector, a potential unregistered generator." "It is my harvester," Rowan said. "The storm knocked the capacitors out of alignment. I was just recalibrating." Nadia raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Your harvester uses encrypted, military-grade communication channels and discusses Thrix. Rowan's practiced mask of indifference did not slip, but his eyes hardened. I do not know what you are talking about. Nadia took a step closer. She was young, perhaps not even 30, but she carried herself with an unnerving stillness. She was not a bully like Brent. She was a scalpel. I overheard part of your call, Mr. Hale. You are in violation of at least 4 ISTC protocols. I am required to report this. You are required to listen to a man fixing his machinery, Rowan countered, his voice quiet. You heard static. I heard you mention a species that has not had official contact in 3 years. In a quadrant where Brent Calder is actively looking for an excuse to declare a biological hazard and seize the remaining independent wells. Nadia looked at the shed, then back at him. You have something in there, something you are protecting, and I need to know if you are a fool, or if you are a conspirator. Rowan looked at this sharp, practical woman. He saw the law in her eyes, inflexible and cold. She represented the world that had abandoned the peripheries, the world that sent drones instead of doctors. But he also saw, deep in her gaze, a flicker of something else. Not suspicion, but calculation. She was not just reciting the rules. She was weighing them. What if I am neither? Rowan said. What if I am just a man who found something broken and decided to fix it? The ESB does not recognize that distinction, Nadia replied. You have 1 hour to declare what you are hiding, or I will bring in a containment team. And unlike Brent Calder, Mr. Hale, I am not interested in making a profit. I am interested in the law. She turned, her boots making no sound on the packed earth, and returned to her skimmer to wait. The clock was ticking. Inside the shed, hidden by an opaque wall of plexiglass, the 3 Thrix teenagers waited, oblivious, as the human world began to circle. The 1-hour deadline Nadia Kim had issued hung in the air, as dry and heavy as the dust outside. Rowan Hale watched her standing by the ESB skimmer, a precise, unmoving silhouette against the harsh morning light. She was the law, and the law, out here, was a sterile instrument, designed to cut, not to heal. If he told her the truth, she would report it. The ESB would descend. The Thrix teenagers would be confiscated as biological hazards, and he would be shipped to Greyfrost Station. If he lied, she would see it. She was not Brent Calder. She was not motivated by greed, but by something far more inflexible procedure. He had one option, a partial truth, a lie built around a fact. My hour is not up, Rowan called out, his voice rough. If you are going to inspect, inspect. But you need a warrant to crack open my private work. Nadia's eyes narrowed. Your evasiveness is a warrant, Mr. Hale. Then be evasive with me, he said, stepping back and gesturing into the dim shed. But I request you keep your scanner on passive. My cultures are sensitive to active pulses. She paused, surprised by the invitation. This was not the action of a man hiding a major biothreat. It was the action of a man protecting a secret. She nodded curtly and followed him inside, her hand resting near the standardized ESB alert beacon on her belt. The shed was cool, the air smelling of damp earth and ozone. She saw the workbench, the calibration tools, the sealed comm unit, and she saw the tank. It was, as he had made it, opaque white, a large, humming cylinder. That is a Class 4 microbial greenhouse, Nadia stated. Her eyes scanned its fittings. Far more advanced than anything required for atmospheric harvesting. That is blue-green anchorage hardware. It's a hobby, Rowan said flatly. A hobby that requires military-grade shielding. The desert is harsh. The local fungi are invasive. He tapped a control panel. A small access port slid open, revealing a thick, slurry-filled Petri dish. "This is what I was talking to Dr. Park about, my fungal samples. A custom-engineered mycelial network. It is designed to scavenge heavy metals from irradiated soil." Nadia leaned closer. Her professional curiosity piqued. She pulled a microscanner from her belt and ran it over the dish. The complexity of the biological chains was astounding. This was not a hobby. This was genius-level bioengineering. "This is..." She paused. "This is viable. This could reclaim hectares." "It's a start," Rowan said. Nadia straightened up, her expression hardening. She was impressed, but not deflected. "This does not explain the keyword Thrix, and it does not explain the 3 distinct, non-human biosignatures my external sensors picked up during the storm." "Thrix is an old Linnaean classification," Rowan lied smoothly. "It's what I named the primary strain. As for your sensors, it was an ion storm. They scramble. You know that." Nadia stared at him, a long, calculating silence stretching between them. He was lying. She knew he was lying. The man who built this culture was not a simple mechanic. He was hiding something vast. But the culture itself was not illegal. It was brilliant. She was caught between her admiration for the scientist and her suspicion of the conspirator. "The ESB is activating a full biometric grid over Basin Ridge," she said, her voice sharp. "Passive sensors. Full spectrum. It will not be scrambled by an ion storm. Whatever you are really doing in here, Mr. Hale, they will find it. And your work this soil project will be confiscated as collateral." She turned and left the shed, the threat hanging in the air. Rowan leaned against the workbench, the tension draining from his shoulders, leaving him cold. She was right. The standard grid was one thing, a full spectrum sweep was another. He was running out of time. He was so immersed in checking the shed's external thermal baffles that he nearly missed Brent Calder's return. The consortium transport rolled up, and Brent emerged, this time without his practiced smile. "You are a bigger fool than I thought, Hale," Brent said, skipping the pleasantries. He gestured at the sky. "You had a diplomat out here, an ISTC hardliner. The rumor is you threatened her. The ESB is deploying an Aura-class sniffer grid. They are not looking for water thieves anymore. They are looking for you." Rowan continued his work, tightening a seal. "I am touched by your concern. Brent, this is not concern. This is business." Brent stepped closer, his voice dropping. "That grid is top of the line. It will find a microbe in a sandstorm. It will find whatever you have locked in that tank." He paused. "I can make it go away. I can jam the grid over your sector. A localized solar flare interference. My technicians can handle it. In exchange, you tell me what you found. My consortium pays top dollar for unsanctioned biological assets. No questions asked." Rowan stood up straight, wiping grease from his hands. "You mean the assets your teams are already hunting?" Brent's eyes went cold. "I do not know what you are talking about. I am offering you a lifeline. Your water debt. That 3-month deficit, I will wipe it clean. You will have a surplus for a year. All for a little information." Rowan looked at the man who would sell the desert its own dust. "I have work to do, Brent." "Fine," Brent snapped. "When they drag you to Greyfrost Station, do not say I did not offer you a deal. They will seize this land. Hale, they will take your fancy harvester. They will crack open that tank and sterilize whatever project you think is so important. Is it worth it?" He did not wait for an answer. He turned, climbed into his transport, and churned away. As the vehicle disappeared, Rowan called out to the empty dust, "Brent, I am not installing a water meter on my conscience." He returned to the shed, his jaw tight. Brent's threat had hit home. He was not just risking himself. He was risking his work, and he was risking the 3 lives in the tank. He made the greenhouse transparent again. The three Thricks were watching him, their large, black eyes filled with a quiet terror they had clearly picked up from the confrontations. Rowan sighed. He had to know what he was dealing with. He opened the tank. The two males and one female, all clearly adolescent, stepped out, their pearlescent skin vibrant with restored hydration. He offered them a data pad. The tallest male, Sale, recoiled with a hiss. The technology was alien, threatening. Rowan changed tactics. He went to his old forge, a relic he used for custom tooling, and picked up a piece of charcoal. He found a clean, white slab of insulated paneling. Low-tech, trustworthy. He held the charcoal out to the female. Eerie. She watched him for a moment, then took it with a long, elegant hand. She knelt on the floor and began to draw. Her movements were swift, economical, and heartbreakingly clear. She drew 3 small figures, their shapes matching their own. Then she drew larger figures, bulky, encased in armored suits that Rowan recognized as modified environmental gear. The large figures carried long, rifle-like devices. She drew one of the rifles firing. It did not shoot a projectile. It shot a beam, a shimmering line of energy. She drew the beam hitting one of the small figures, who fell. Then, she drew a cloud rising from the fallen Thricks. Not blood, steam, dehydration weapons. The youngest male, Toma, whimpered. He touched his own arm, then made a scraping, peeling motion with his fingers, his face tight with remembered horror. Sale, the tallest, took the charcoal from Eerie. His hand was shaking with what looked like rage. He drew a complex symbol, a stylized, swirling logo. Rowan's blood ran cold. He knew that logo. He had seen it on encrypted manifests on the dark feeds. It was the brand for a high-end, off-world euphoric drug called abalone. It was rumored to be harvested, not synthesized. Its source, a closely guarded secret. He looked at the logo. He looked at the shimmering, abalone-like skin of the Thricks teenagers. Biopoachers, Rowan whispered. They were not just capturing them. They were harvesting them. Harvesting their skin, their bodily fluids, to manufacture a commercial drug. And then, the final piece clicked into place, cold and sharp. Who possessed the most advanced, restricted, weaponized dehydration technology on Terra? Who controlled the patents for cellular moisture disruption, the Synoptic Water Energy Consortium? This was not random piracy. This was a corporate black operation. Brent Calder was not guessing about biological assets. He was hunting them. And these 3 children had escaped. A piercing, high-frequency alarm blared through the shed. The ESB grid. It was active. Rowan leaped to his monitors. The sky was filled with them. Not the usual teardrop drones, but new, saucer-shaped sniffers, flying low, sweeping the ridge in a tight, overlapping biometric search pattern. They were 2 kilometers out and closing fast. "Back in the tank," he ordered, using sharp, urgent gestures. Now. The Thricks scrambled back into the greenhouse. Rowan sealed the hatch, but he knew the shielding was not enough. The Aura-class grid did not just look for heat. It looked for life. It measured tachyonic decay, neutrino scatter, the faint quantum signature that all living biological systems emitted. His shed would light up like a star. "Helena, I need it. Now," he barked into his private comm. "Rowan, it is experimental." Dr. Helena Park's voice was frantic. "It has never been tested under a military-grade sweep. It might overload. It might just amplify your signal and pinpoint you. It is all I have. Activate authorization." He ran to a locked steel cabinet and pulled out what looked like a folded, dried, leathery sheet. It was the ion reflective fungal mesh, a project he and Helena had co-authored years ago. A biological system designed to mimic Atmospheric ion scatter. Authorization granted, Helena's voice came back, tight with fear. Gods help you, Rowan. He unfurled the mesh. It was slightly damp, clinging to itself. It was alive. He threw it over the opaque microbial tank, covering it completely. He hit the activation switch. The mesh hummed, drawing power from the shed's core. It did not block the Thrix's life signs. It refracted them. It took the three distinct, high-functioning biological signatures and shattered them into a chaotic, unreadable spectrum, making them appear as nothing more than the background geological radiation of the mineral-rich desert. The drones were overhead. Rowan watched his pirated ESB scanner feed, his heart pounding against his ribs. The scanner display showed his sector. The drones swept over his shed. The signature was noise, a blur of static. The drones hovered, their internal logic struggling to resolve the conflicting data. They were classifying it as geological interference. Rowan was pouring sweat. He had bought himself minutes, but the noise of the drones had attracted attention. A new vehicle was approaching, moving fast. Nadia Kim's ESB skimmer. She had returned, and this time she was not asking. She stepped out of the vehicle, datapad in hand, just as the drones were making their second pass. She looked up at the advanced sweepers, then at the shed. She held up her own scanner. It was going wild, the readings fluctuating impossibly. "Mr. Hale," she shouted over the whine of the drones, "you are actively interfering with an ESB security sweep that is a 10-year mandatory sentence at Greyfrost Station." Rowan stepped out, his face a mask of strained innocence. "My apologies, ma'am. I am running a high-ion diagnostic on my soil cultures. It tends to scramble delicate electronics. An unfortunate side effect." Nadia stared at him, her fury mixing with a profound disbelief. He was lying, but the lie was technologically brilliant. She had never seen a distortion field like this. This was not the work of a peripheral mechanic. This was the work of a master. "Who are you, Hale?" she demanded, her voice low. "Just a man trying to work." The ESB drones, unable to get a clear lock, finally flagged his location as a Class 3 geological anomaly and moved on, their search pattern continuing east. Nadia was shaking, her knuckles white on the datapad. She had been outmaneuvered. She had a diplomatic warrant. But she could not breach his shed based on geological interference without starting a jurisdictional war with the Science Division. "This is not over," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "My warrant is active for 24 hours. I will find out what you are doing." "You do what you have to, ma'am," Rowan said, his relief making him weak. He watched her leave, a second cloud of dust in one day. Night fell. The ridge was silent, the tension settling like silt. Rowan, exhausted, monitored the ESB net, which had quieted. Inside the tank, the three Thrix were resting, their soft, trilling breaths the only sound in the shed. Rowan was tracing the poacher's logo on his workbench when the sky lit up. It was not a storm. It was not a drone. It was a column of cold, blue-white light that punched through the atmosphere, silent, absolute, and terrifyingly precise. It centered directly on his shed, illuminating the small patch of desert as brightly as midday. The Thrix were instantly on their feet, their bodies rigid. They stared up through the shed's reinforced skylight. A chorus of trills, sharp and sudden, filled the air. It was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of recognition. A Thrix ship was in high orbit. Rowan's official ISTC comm unit, the one he was required to maintain, crackled to life, bypassing his encryption. A voice spoke, not human, not synthesized, but a chorus of perfect, resonant tones. "Rowan Hale, civilian, you are summoned by the Thrix Protectorate. You will present yourself to the Interspecies Treaty Council at the Desert Crystal Dais. You will arrive in 6 hours. You will bring no weapons. You will bring no technology. You will come alone." The column of light vanished. The desert was plunged back into darkness. Rowan stared at the comm unit. He had been summoned by the Thrix to the council. He was not just a criminal anymore. He was a diplomatic incident, miles away, in the sterile gray of the ESB regional outpost. Nadia Kim was filing her final, frustrated report. She was composing the request for a full containment team to breach Hale's shed, citing national security. Before she could send it, an encrypted message slid into her private queue. It was from her old mentor at the ISTC headquarters, a man who had guided her career. The message read, "Nadia, stand down on the Basin Ridge anomaly. The Thrix have filed a formal grievance and a summons. They are invoking the Refugee Protector Clause. Article 7. The civilian, Hale, is being brought in for a full public tribunal." Nadia's blood ran cold. A public tribunal. For unauthorized contact that was archaic. A show trial. She read on. "The ESB is furious. The Synoptic Water Energy Consortium is framing it as a civilian-abetted infiltration, a threat to planetary security. They are pushing for the maximum sentence indefinite detention at Greyfrost Station. The Thrix are claiming Hale acted as a sanctuary giver. It is a diplomatic nightmare." Nadia leaned back, stunned. She suddenly understood. Rowan was not a conspirator. He was not a poacher. He was a humanitarian. And he was about to be crucified by Brent Calder's corporate lobbying and the ESB's inflexible paranoia. Her mentor's final line was a clear warning. "Do not get involved. This will destroy any career that touches it. Let the ESB clean up their own mess." Nadia looked at the screen. She saw Rowan's file X blue-green anchorage. She saw the ESB incident report. And she saw Brent Calder's name listed as the primary civilian consulting party. She thought of Rowan's dry, exhausted defiance. "I am not installing a water meter on my conscience." She closed her report. She deleted the request for a containment team. She opened a new file. A formal application to the ISTC Judiciary. Case ISTC versus Rowan Hale. Subject unauthorized contact and invocation of Article 7. Requesting assignment as legal counsel for the defense. She hit send. She felt a terrifying lurch, the feeling of stepping off a cliff. She had just set her entire career on fire. The 6 hours Rowan Hale had been given felt like a closing window. The desert outside his shed was unnervingly silent, the column of blue light gone, leaving only the ozone scent of its presence. The 3 Thrix teenagers were gathered near the opaque tank, their large, dark eyes fixed on him. They had heard the disembodied, choral voice. They knew. Sale, the eldest, stepped forward. He made the gesture he had used before pointing to the water, then to Rowan, then to his own chest. Life-giver. He then added a new, sharp gesture, a slicing motion at his own neck, followed by pointing at Rowan. A question. "They will harm you." "I have to go," Rowan said, his voice rough. He pointed to the sky, then to his own chest. Summoned. He expected fear. Instead, Eerie, the female, touched his arm. It was a light, cool touch, like brushed silk. She trilled softly, a sound of profound, ancient sadness. They were not afraid for themselves. They were afraid for him. An alert chimed on his hidden receiver, a frequency only he and Helena used. He looked at the monitor. 3 figures, on foot, moving with unnatural speed and grace across the ridges. They wore no heat-emitting tech. They were invisible to the ESB grid. A Thrix escort. "You have to go too," Rowan told the teens. He pointed to the monitor, then to the shed's shielded exit. "Family. They are here." He led them to the exit. The three figures were waiting in the pre-dawn gloom, draped in cloaks that seemed to drink the light. They were Thrix, but adults taller, their presence radiating a calm, cold authority. A silent, swift exchange of gestures passed between the adults and the children. Sile, Eerie, and Toma turned back to Rowan one last time. They did not bow. They simply placed their right hands over their hearts and held his gaze. Then, as one, they turned and melted into the desert with their escort, vanishing as if they had never been. Rowan was alone. He had 6 hours. The summons was for him, and him alone. He went back inside the shed and began to stripe. He removed his comm unit and his data pad, dropping them onto the workbench. He unclipped his multi-tool, his diagnostic scanner, his thermal field generator. He unstrapped the microbial modules from his forearms. All technology. He left it all. He stood for a moment in his simple work tunic and trousers. He was, once again, just a man. He walked to a small, fireproofed steel box under his workbench, a box he had not opened in 5 years. He keyed in the manual code. Inside, there was a sealed file, a data chip he would never access, and a small, smooth object. It was a shard of fired clay, a deep terracotta red, impressed with the faint outline of a leaf. It was a piece of the first soil regeneration pot his wife, Rodina, had ever made. A land charm. He closed his hand around it. The clay was cool. It was the only thing he took with him. He stepped out into the desert. He did not take his vehicle. He began to walk the 30 kilometers to the desert crystal dais, a speck of impossible architecture shimmering on the eastern horizon. Nadia Kim's world was exploding. The moment she sent the request, her superior, Director Varick, initiated a Priority 1 video call. His face materialized on her screen, not from the high-resolution ISTC emitters, but from a grainy, secured ESB channel. He looked furious. "Kim, have you lost your mind?" Varick did not shout. His voice was a low, dangerous hiss. "You are requesting to defend a peripheral terrorist. He is being charged with compromising planetary security. He ignored your direct order. Director, he is being charged with unauthorized contact by the ESB, but the Thrix are simultaneously invoking Refugee Protector. Article 7, Nadia said, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering. That makes this an ISTC jurisdictional conflict, not an ESB internal matter. My request is valid under the Interspecies Legal Concordance. Section 4. Do not quote the concordance at me, Varick snapped. You are stepping in front of a corporate freight train. The Synoptic Water Energy Consortium is the primary civilian partner for the ESB in that sector. Brent Calder is already framing this as a hostile infiltration that Hale abetted. The media is picking it up. You are attaching your name to a traitor. Or to a civilian exercising his rights under Article 7, Nadia countered. You are committing career suicide, Varick said flatly. You had a path to the orbital stations. You are throwing it away for a dust farmer. I am officially denying your request. With respect, Director. You cannot, Nadia said, her voice quiet. As the ranking ISTC diplomat on site at the time of the incident, my request for counsel takes precedence. You can file a protest, but you cannot stop me from appearing. The system is already processing my credentials. Varick stared at her, his expression a mix of rage and something she could not name. Pity, perhaps. Fine, you are on your own. Kim, no ISTC resources, no support staff. You are formally censured, and your security clearance is flagged for review, effective immediately. The screen went black. Nadia let out a single, shuddering breath. She was alone. She had no team, no resources, and a client who was about to be fed to the wolves. She had less than 6 hours. She needed evidence. She needed to know why Brent Calder was so invested. She boarded her skimmer and set the navigation for the desert crystal dais. As the vehicle sped across the flats, she pulled up every file she could access with her now-flagged credentials. She cross-referenced ESB patrol logs, synoptic water energy shipping manifests, and anonymous tips from the peripheral settlements. The pattern emerged, stark and ugly. The ESB's increased security in Basin Ridge, which had begun 3 months ago, was not random. It was a direct response to a series of anonymous tips about unregistered biological activity. Nadia traced the origin nodes of those tips. They led back to encrypted servers owned by a shell corporation. A shell corporation owned, in turn, by the Synoptic Water Energy Consortium. Brent was not reacting to a threat. He was creating one. He had seeded the media with rumors of alien contaminants in the independent wells. The ESB, citing these tips, declared a potential biohazard quarantine over the area, restricting civilian access to groundwater. This forced the independent settlers to buy exclusively from Synoptic's atmospheric generators, at a 300% markup. The collusion was blatant. The ESB got to expand its authority and budget, and Brent Calder secured a total monopoly on the water supply. It was a racket built on fear. And Rowan Hale, a man who had found actual aliens, was not a threat to security. He was a threat to the business model. Nadia's hands tightened on the controls. This was not just a legal fight. It was a war. The desert crystal dais rose from the wasteland like a fever dream. It was a kilometer-high spire of interlocking crystalline plates and holographic emitters, a beacon of interstellar diplomacy. Its entire structure was a colossal humidity capture system, maintaining a lush, temperate biosphere inside while the world outside baked. Rowan Hale arrived on foot, his clothes covered in dust, his face etched with sun and wind. The guards at the entrance, ESB troopers in polished black armor, regarded him with contempt. "Rowan Hale," he said, his voice raw. "We know who you are," one guard sneered. "Weapon scan." Rowan held his arms out. "Left all my weapons at home. My wrenches, my diagnostic tools, even my pocket knife." The scanner passed over him. Green, green, green. Then flared red over his trouser pocket. The guards tensed, raising their pulse rifles. "Empty your pocket, slowly." Rowan reached in and pulled out the small, terracotta red clay shard. He held it up. "A piece of a pot. My wife made it." The guard looked at him, then at the scanner, which was still flagging the object. "It's non-metallic, non-explosive, non-biological." "What is it?" "A land charm," Rowan said. The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Whatever. It's inert. Go." Rowan entered the Grand Concourse. The shift was jarring. He went from a silent world of grit and wind to a vast, humming cavern of cool, moist air, alive with the sound of running water and the murmur of 100 languages. Fountains cascaded down walls of living green, and delegates from a dozen different species, crystalline entities from Rigel, towering, furred bipeds from Polaris, methane-breathing beings in contained suits, all moved with purpose. And in the center of the concourse, holding court by a pillar of cascading orchids, was Brent Calder. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit, whispering into the ear of a high-ranking ESB official. He looked up as Rowan entered, and a small, confident smile played on his lips. He was not a peripheral manager today. He was a power broker. He had been granted a seat at the tribunal as a public-private security advisor. Rowan ignored him, his gaze sweeping the room. He saw the chamber doors, sealed, guarded. He saw the calm, statuesque figure of Ariston Vale, the presiding arbiter of the ISTC, speaking quietly with a Thrix delegate. The Thrix was tall, encased in a shimmering, humidified suit, its face unreadable. "Mr. Hale," he turned. Nadia Kim was standing there, her face pale but set with a rigid determination. She wore her crisp diplomatic uniform, a stark contrast to his own disheveled state. "You are the diplomat," Rowan said. "I am Nadia Kim," she said, her voice low and rapid. "I am your legal counsel." Rowan stared at her. "My what?" "I have filed to represent you. Under the ISTC Concordance, you are entitled to counsel in a jurisdictional dispute, which this is." "Why?" Rowan asked. It was the only word that came to mind. "They told you not to." "They did," Nadia said curtly. "They also told me you were a terrorist. I am finding I disagree with my superiors. We have 20 minutes. Here is what you are facing." Just as she spoke, a data packet chimed on her pad. It was from a secured, anonymous academic server. From Helena. Nadia's eyes scanned the first lines, and her breath caught. "Helena Park," Rowan said, seeing her expression. "She has sent... Good gods! She has sent proof." Nadia's fingers flew across the pad. High-resolution satellite images from the dry border. She found the poachers' camp, chemical analysis of the soil, traces of the same refined dehydration agent, and shipping manifests. An ESB-cleared agricultural shipment from a Synoptic Water Energy subsidiary, delivered to that exact coordinate 2 weeks ago. She has him. Rowan. She has Brent. A chime echoed through the concourse, signaling the opening of the tribunal. As they turned toward the doors, the massive holographic news screens that lined the walls flickered to life. Brent Calder's face appeared, 10 meters high. It was a pre-recorded interview. "A grave threat," Brent was saying, his face a mask of civic concern. "This individual, Rowan Hale, a man with a troubled past, has been actively concealing unregistered alien bioforms. He has endangered not only Basin Ridge, but our entire interstellar relationship. We at the Synoptic Consortium, in partnership with the ESB, call for swift and decisive action to ensure our security." The concourse murmured. Delegates looked from the screen to the dusty, silent man standing beside Nadia Kim. The narrative was set. He was guilty. "He's good," Rowan murmured. "He frames it as security, not profit." "It's not over," Nadia said, her voice steel. "Let's go." They entered the tribunal chamber. It was vast, cold, and arranged in a perfect, intimidating circle. In the center was a raised platform for the accused. Rowan walked to it and stood. Above him, the delegates and arbiters filled the rising tiers. Ariston Vale sat at the head, his expression impassive. Brent Calder was seated in a place of honor, next to the ESB's chief prosecutor. Ariston Vale struck a small, crystalline chime. The room fell silent. "This tribunal is convened," Ariston's voice resonated, calm and clear. "We are here to address the matter of civilian Rowan Hale and the formal charges filed by the Extraterritorial Security Bureau, juxtaposed with the invocation of Article 7 by the Thrix Protectorate." The ESB prosecutor, a severe woman with cold eyes, stood. "The ESB charges Rowan Hale with 3 counts: unsanctioned contact with an unlisted species, aiding and abetting the evasion of quarantine protocols, and active concealment of unregistered, potentially hazardous biological entities. The ESB requests the Council waive ISTC jurisdiction and surrender the accused for indefinite processing and detention at the Grey Frost Station." The words echoed in the silence. Indefinite detention. A life sentence. Ariston Vale looked at Rowan. "Mr. Hale, how do you respond to these charges?" Rowan stood still, his hand in his pocket, clutching the shard of clay. He said nothing. The accused must enter a plea, the prosecutor snapped. Nadia rose. Arbiter Vale, counsel for the defense requests a preliminary motion to dismiss, based on evidence of jurisdictional malfeasance and— The accused will enter a plea first, Counselor, Ariston said, his voice mild but firm. Nadia sat down, frustrated. All eyes were on Rowan. He looked up, not at the arbiter, but at the tiers of alien faces, the human politicians, the ESB troopers. He saw the cold judgment, the fear, the curiosity. It was blue-green Anchorage all over again. The inquiry, the sterile room, the accusations, the way they had looked at him when Rodina's name was read out. He finally spoke, his voice rough from the desert walk, but it carried in the perfect acoustics. If kindness is a crime, he said, I ask that this council provide a standardized weight, so I can pay the fine by the kilo. A ripple of shock went through the chamber. A few delegates murmured. The ESB prosecutor's face flushed with anger. Ariston Vale's expression did not change, but he held up a hand for silence. Nadia closed her eyes for a brief second. He's impossible. He was not just defending himself. He was putting the entire system on trial. And he was, in his own dry, broken way, magnificent. She felt a sudden, terrifying shift inside her. This was no longer about her career. It was not even just about the law. It was about the man. Rowan met Brent Calder's gaze across the chamber. Brent's smile was gone. Rowan's mind was not entirely in the room. He was standing on a gantry at blue-green Anchorage. The alarms screaming. The air thick with escaped humidity. He saw Rodina at the far end of the corridor, waving to him, just before the bulkhead door failed. I failed, he thought. I failed to save the one person who mattered. He looked at the Thrix delegate. I did not fail this time, whatever the cost. Rowan's dry remark about paying a fine by the kilo hung in the vast, silent chamber. It was a pebble thrown at a mountain of procedure. The ESB prosecutor, a severe woman named Kaylin, flushed a deep, angry red. Arbiter Vale, the accused is in contempt. His flippancy is an admission of guilt. The accused, Nadia Kim's voice cut through the tension, sharp and clear as the crystal structure around them. Is waiting for a relevant charge. She stood, her datapad held in one hand. She was alone, unsupported, and she was visibly trembling, but her voice was a steel rod. Arbiter Vale, the defense moves to dismiss all 3 charges filed by the ESB. The prosecutor laughed, a short, barking sound. On what grounds? Counselor wishful thinking. On the grounds that they are procedurally irrelevant, Nadia said. Her eyes locked on Ariston Vale. The ESB has charged Mr. Hale with violating quarantine protocols. However, the Thrix Protectorate has simultaneously invoked Article 7 of the Interspecies Concordance. This is a jurisdictional conflict, and I submit that ISTC law, not ESB internal security mandates, must take precedence. The law is clear, Kaylin snapped. He made contact. He hid them. He provided aid, Nadia countered. Which brings me to my specific motion. The prosecution's entire case rests on the illegality of Mr. Hale's actions. But I cite the Juvenile Bioform Protection Treaty, Article 4, Section 2. It states, and I quote, in any designated Level 3 or higher hostile environment, the imperative of immediate, life-sustaining aid to a verified juvenile life form supersedes all standard contact protocols and quarantine procedures. Kaylin was on her feet. Basin Ridge is not a designated hostile environment. It is a civilian settlement. It is a desert, Nadia shot back, her voice ringing with sudden passion. It registers at 98% ambient aridity. That is not just a hostile environment to a hydration-based species. Arbiter, it is a death sentence. Mr. Hale did not conceal refugees. He moved them from an execution chamber to a shelter. The treaty applies. Ariston Vale held up a hand. The chamber was silent. The counselor raises a valid legal framework. The applicability of the treaty, however, depends on two factors. First, that the Thrix were indeed juveniles. Second, that they were in immediate, life-threatening danger. We can confirm the first, Ariston said, nodding to the Thrix delegate, who inclined his head. For the second, the Council requires proof of this danger. Counselor Kim, you have the floor. This was the first hurdle. Thank you, Arbiter. I ask that the Thrix delegation be permitted to present their evidence regarding the circumstances of their arrival. Ariston nodded. The lights in the great chamber dimmed. A holographic display shimmered to life above the central platform. The image was shaky, chaotic. It was point-of-view footage, recorded from the ocular implants of one of the Thrix. They were running. The sound was a symphony of terror, their own high-pitched, trilling breaths, the crunch of dry earth under their feet, and behind them, the heavy, mechanized thud of armored boots. A voice shouted an accented, guttural standard. "Cut off the female! She's the most valuable." The camera angle whipped around. They saw the poachers, 3 of them, encased in bulky, modified environmental suits, their faces hidden by polarized visors. They carried long, rifle-like devices with triple-barreled condenser muzzles. One of the poachers raised his weapon. The footage zoomed in, a reflex of the Thrix's implant. On the shoulder pauldron of the armored suit was a logo. Stark and white, the swirling, stylized vortex of the Synoptic Water Energy Consortium. Across the room, Brent Calder went rigid, his knuckles whitening on his armrest. The poacher fired. The weapon did not discharge a projectile. It unleashed a shimmering, concentrated beam of energy. It looked like focused heat, but it was not. It was a targeted dehydration field. The beam struck a 4th Thrix teenager, one who had stumbled. The chamber audibly gasped. It was the most horrific death any of them had ever witnessed. There was no blood. The Thrix juvenile screamed, a sound that was instantly cut short as every cell in its body was flash-dried. The being did not just fall. It crumbled, its pearlescent skin turning to brittle, gray ash. A cloud of superheated steam erupted from the remains. The body's entire water content vaporized in less than a second. The video feed went black as the survivor, Eerie, finally collapsed in the dust, the footage ending as she lost consciousness. The chamber lights slowly rose, revealing a room of stunned, horrified faces. Several delegates were visibly ill. "My gods," someone whispered. Nadia stood in the silence, her face pale. "That," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "is the immediate, life-threatening danger." They were not just lost, Arbiter. They were being hunted with restricted, military-grade dehydration weapons. The same weapons patented by the Synoptic Consortium. Brent Calder was on his feet, his face a mask of controlled fury. "This is an outrage, a fabrication. My consortium develops agricultural tools. This is a despicable, doctored video, designed to slander a corporation that provides 90% of this planet's clean water." "The data is authenticated by the Thrix Protectorate," Ariston Vale said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It is not doctored." The ESB prosecutor, Kalen, scrambled to recover. "This is tragic. A tragedy. But it changes nothing about the accused. It only proves that these aliens are involved in a violent, off-world conflict. It makes his actions worse. He brought this violence to our doorstep, and his greatest crime, the one we cannot ignore, was his deliberate, malicious interference with an ESB security sweep." She pointed at Rowan. "He used a sophisticated, military-grade jamming device to blind our sensors, to hide these fugitives. That is not an act of mercy, Arbiter." That is an act of conspiracy. That is terrorism, the chamber murmured. She had found a new foothold. The humanitarian argument was strong, but active. Technological interference was a clear violation. I am glad, Nadia said, her voice cutting through the rising murmur, that the prosecution brought up the jamming device. It allows me to introduce my first witness. Counselor, Ariston asked. I call Dr. Helena Park, head of regenerative biology at the Terraforming Institute, Kalen scoffed. A peripheral soil scientist. What is she going to testify about crop rotation? A new holodisplay lit up, showing Dr. Helena Park's face. She was in her lab, her gray hair tied back, her expression one of profound, academic terror. Dr. Park, Nadia said, her voice calming. You have been analyzing data from the Basin Ridge sector for some time, correct? I have, Helena said, her voice thin. I have been monitoring the poachers' activity. They have been active on the dry border for 6 months. And did you find any connection to the entities the prosecution has mentioned? I did. Helena's hand trembled as she activated her display. The images that had shocked Nadia now filled the chamber. High-resolution satellite scans of the poachers' last known campsite. A new image appeared. My lab's chemical analysis of the soil. It shows residue of the same weaponized, catalyzed dehydration agent from the video. That chemical signature. It is protected by over 50 patents. All of them are owned by a Synoptic Water Energy subsidiary. Brent leaped up. This is slander. She is a known associate of the accused. This is a conspiracy. Silence. Advisor Calder. Ariston Vale commanded. Dr. Park, continue. That is all for the poaching, Arbiter, Nadia said. Now, I would like to discuss the jamming device. Helena's expression shifted from fear to a more confident, academic focus. Doctor, Nadia continued, the ESB claims Mr. Hale used a high-tech device to blind their Aura-class sniffers. Are you aware of such technology? I am, Helena said. Because it is mine. It is not a jammer. It is an ion-reflective fungal mesh. It is a biological organism, not a machine. And its purpose. It is a regenerative tool, Helena explained, her voice gaining strength. We cultivate it to shield delicate, newly reclaimed soils from harmful atmospheric ion radiation. It does not jam signals. It refracts them. It takes a concentrated biological signature and scatters it, making it indistinguishable from the background radiation of the planet. It makes life look like a rock. The chamber was fascinated. The ESB prosecutor looked confused. What does this have to do with? And doctor, Nadia pressed, her voice sharp as a diamond. This is a very complex project. Who designed this revolutionary organism? Helena looked at Nadia, then her gaze shifted, finding Rowan where he stood, alone on the platform. It was a joint project, Dr. Park said, her voice filled with a sudden, fierce pride. I handled the biological cultivation, but the quantum refraction matrix, the core architecture that makes it work, that was designed by my co-author. And who? Nadia asked, her voice ringing in the sudden, absolute silence. Was your co-author, Dr. Rowan Hale, Helena said. Before he left the Institute, he was the single most brilliant biosystems architect I have ever known. The bomb had detonated. Rowan Hale was not a mechanic. He was not a peripheral dust farmer. He was the architect. Brent Calder's face was ashen. He had not just underestimated a hermit. He had underestimated a genius. The prosecutor, Kalen, was speechless. Her entire case, the charges. The narrative of a dangerous, subversive mechanic had just evaporated. Brent was desperate. He leaned over, whispering frantically to his own legal counsel, who then passed a data slate to the prosecutor. Kalen seized it like a lifeline. Arbiter, this changes nothing. It only proves the accused is more dangerous, not less. He has the means to be a terrorist and we have a new witness, a direct witness to his conspiracy. The council will hear this witness, Ariston said. His eyes narrowed. We call Captain Harsk, Kalen announced. The mercenary poacher, captured by an ESB patrol this morning while attempting to flee the sector. The chamber doors opened. 2 ESB guards marched in a large, brutish man in a torn utility suit. His face was bruised, but his eyes were strangely dull, flat. Captain Harsk, Kalen said. You led the poaching team. Yes, Harsk said. His voice was a monotone. Who hired you? An anonymous client. Encrypted contract. And did you track the Thrix assets to Rowan Hale's shed? Yes. And did you make contact with him? No, Harsk said. He contacted us. After he secured the assets, he was negotiating a price. He was a middleman. He was going to sell them to us. Nadia felt the air leave her lungs. It was a direct, devastating accusation, but it felt wrong. It was too neat. She approached the witness. Captain Harsk, you claim Mr. Hale contacted you. What was his price? Harsk's eyes glazed, unfocused. He was negotiating a price. That is not an answer. What did he ask for credits water technology? Harsk just stared. He was a middleman. He was negotiating. He was a broken record. Nadia looked closer, seeing the faint tremor in his hands, the lack of focus in his pupils. Arbiter Vale, Nadia said suddenly. The witness is compromised. I request a passive neural scan. Kalen exploded. Outrageous, that is medically invasive. It is a violation of the witness's rights. We are not on trial here. You are if you are planting testimony, Nadia snapped. The charges are severe, Ariston Vale said, his voice cold. The witness's credibility is paramount. The request is granted. A medical officer, a tall, calm Xylopian, glided forward with a handheld scanner. He passed it over Harsk's head. A holographic display of the man's brain appeared. And there, nestled against his frontal lobe, was a small, dark object, a metallic implant. A compliance chip, Nadia whispered, horrified. His testimony is synthetic, she shouted, turning to the arbiter. It is a coerced, planted fabrication. The man is not a witness. He is a puppet. The chamber erupted. Delegates were on their feet, shouting in a dozen languages. Shame, subterfuge. This is a mockery, Kalen, the prosecutor, looked at the chip, then at Brent, her face a mask of genuine, unfeigned horror. She had been used. Silence. Ariston Vale's voice was a physical force. He struck the crystalline chime, its pure note cutting through the chaos. Captain Harsk is dismissed. His testimony is stricken. The ESB's case against Rowan Hale is compromised. He looked at the prosecutor. You are bordering on contempt for this counsel, Kalen. Your case is dissolved. But Ariston did not look at Rowan. However, the fact of the concealment remains. The invocation of Article 7 must be answered. We will hear from the refugees themselves. The chamber doors opened again. The noise died instantly. Sile, Eerie, and Toma walked into the chamber. They were no longer caked in dust. They were clean, their pearlescent skin shimmering under the lights. They looked impossibly fragile, their large, black eyes taking in the vast, alien crowd. They walked, not to the witness stand, but to the center, standing just below Rowan. A Thrix translator, a tall, suited adult, stood with them. Its voice was a series of soft, resonant chimes that the room's universal translator rendered into calm, melodic standard. Arbiter Vale, the young ones will speak. Sale, son of the watercolors, will speak for them. Sale looked up, not at the Arbiter, but directly at Rowan. He spoke in his trilling, bird-like language. The translator spoke. We ran. The hunters came from the sky and boiled the blood of our sister, Issa. They made her into steam. We ran until the world was fire. We fell by the great metal pool. We were dying. We were dust. Sale turned his gaze from Rowan and looked at the tiers of delegates. We waited to die, the translator continued. Then he came. He did not carry a weapon. He did not shout. He did not ask our registry. He did not question our value. He carried us. He put us in the rain. Sile paused, his small body tensing. He pointed a long, elegant finger, not at the prosecutor, but directly at Brent Calder. We have heard. The translator's voice grew cold. The man who sells the air. He puts a price on every drop. He meters the rain. He builds walls of fear so that he can sell what is free. Then, Sale turned back to Rowan Hale. His expression was unreadable, but his voice, even untranslated, was thick with an emotion that every being in the room understood. This man, Sile said, placing his hand over his own heart. He opened the tap in the desert, and he asked no price. The simple, profound statement landed with the force of a physical blow. It was the entire trial, the entire conflict, distilled into one perfect metaphor. The man who meters water, and the man who gives it away. Brent Calder was ruined. He had lost the legal battle. He had lost the technological battle. And now, he had lost the moral war in front of the entire interstellar community. His face, which had been pale with shock, contorted into a mask of pure, reptilian fury. He had been beaten. He was cornered. And he was not a man who accepted defeat. His hand, hidden by the armrest of his console, moved to a hard-keyed, non-network datapad. His thumb found the toggle. He was not just a white-collar criminal. He was a saboteur. He pressed the icon. A low, deep shudder ran through the 1-kilometer-high spire. It was not an explosion. It was a cessation. The sound of the great waterfalls and internal rivers that fed the dais stopped. The complex, resonant hum of the world's most advanced humidity regulation system died, replaced by a terrifying, heavy silence. A fraction of a second later, the air, once cool and moist, became sharp, thin, and hot. The ambient humidity, once a perfect 70%, began to plummet. Red emergency lights flashed. A synthesized voice echoed through the chamber. Warning: primary atmospheric and humidity systems failure. Warning: containment breach imminent. Panic. Delegates were shouting. The methane-breathing delegate's containment suit blared a high-pitched alarm. Its internal atmosphere failing. And then, a collective gasp. The Arbiter's primary aide, a Xyloth delegate named Pella, was a being composed of cohesive, sentient vapor. As the humidity vanished, Pella's shimmering, gaseous form began to thin. It lost its cohesion, its colors fading. It was visibly dissipating, its life force evaporating into the dry, hot air. It was dying, right in front of them. Brent Calder leaped to his feet. He pointed a trembling, accusatory finger at Rowan Hale, his voice ringing with manufactured horror. Sabotage, he screamed. It is him, the bioengineer. He did this. He has crippled the dais. He is an eco-terrorist. He is trying to kill us all to escape. Seize him. Brent Calder's accusation echoed in the sudden, terrible silence of the failing system. Seize him. The ESB guards, their rifles raised, began to advance on Rowan. The air in the chamber was already painfully thin, hot, and dry. The ambient humidity, once a stable 70%, had plummeted to 30 and was still falling. Delegates were screaming. The methane breather's containment suit was in full, wailing alarm, but all eyes were on the Xylopian delegate, Pella, the gaseous being. A shimmering column of intelligent vapor was losing its form. It was visibly thinning, its colors fading as it dissipated into the arid air. It was dying. The ESB guards hesitated, their eyes on the dying delegate, then on Rowan, their faces torn between their orders and the immediate, unfolding horror. Rowan Hale did not run. He did not plead. He simply closed his eyes for 1/2 second. He was not in the dais. He was on a gantry at blue-green anchorage, the air thick with scalding, uncontrolled steam, the alarms screaming. He saw Rodina, her hand pressed against the glass of the observation port, her mouth forming his name. Not again. He moved. His actions were so fast, so precise. They defied comprehension. He was not a mechanic. He was not a farmer. He was an architect, and this chamber was his new system. "Get back," he roared. It was not a plea. It was a command. He ripped open the inner lining of his dusty, threadbare work jacket. It was not cloth. The lining was a complex, dark brown, leathery mat. It was a dormant, high-density memory spore network, a failsafe he had built into his clothes and never used. A living system, kept in hibernation, waiting for a catalyst. He tore the network free. At the same moment, he slapped his own forearms, two seemingly inert patches of skin on his tunic, which Nadia had mistaken for simple repairs, split open. They were not patches. They were sealed, flexible biomodules, containing concentrated, nutrient-rich microbial catalysts. He tore the modules from his tunic, his skin raw underneath. He crushed them in his fists, smearing the thick, gelatinous catalyst over the surface of the spore network. Then, he did the one thing that no one, not even Brent, could have predicted. He slammed the activated spore network against his own chest. "Rowan," Nadia screamed, thinking he was killing himself. The network pulsed, a faint blue light. It was drawing the only significant source of moisture available to it, his own body. Rowan grunted, a sharp exhalation of pain and effort. His skin, where the network touched, grew pale. The system was flash-drawing hydration from his own cells, using him as its battery. And then, it began. The spore network, supercharged by the catalyst and fueled by his own life water, did what it was designed to do. It atomized the moisture, refracting it through the memory spores, and expelled it. A cloud of fine, cool, breathable mist erupted from his chest, billowing outwards. It was not just water, it was an ecosystem. The spores were engineered to multiply, to capture any ambient molecule of H2O and replicate, creating a self-sustaining fog. The ESB guards froze, their rifles pointed at a man who was, impossibly, becoming the center of a localized rainstorm. The mist expanded rapidly, swirling from the central platform. It was cool, clean, and heavy. It moved with an intelligence, a design, rolling towards the areas of greatest atmospheric need. Rowan stood in the center of his creation, his face pale and pouring sweat, his body visibly strained. He was a human irrigation system. He looked at the stunned, armed guards, his expression of exhaustion momentarily broken by a flash of the bone-dry humor that had kept him alive in the desert. "I charge by the cubic meter of mist," he said, his voice a raw rasp. "Who is signing the invoice?" The panic in the chamber broke. The absurd, impossible joke, delivered by a man generating a miracle, shattered the fear. Nadia Kim snapped into action. She was not a scientist, but she was a leader. She saw Rowan, saw what he was doing, and understood her own role. She pointed to the Thrix delegation, who were watching Rowan with expressions of profound, religious awe. "Their suits!" Nadia shouted at the other delegates, her voice cutting through the remaining confusion. "The Thrix suits are self-humidifying Arbiter's staff. Get the Xylopian delegate to them. Move now." The Thrix, understanding instantly, moved to the dissipating form of Pella. As Rowan's life-giving mist swirled around them, they formed a protective circle, their own suit emitters creating a stable, high-humidity pocket. Pella's form, which had thinned to a barely visible wisp, began to cohere. It shuddered, then solidified, its colors returning, faint but stable. The delegate was alive. Nadia turned, her eyes blazing, to the ESB prosecutor, Kalen, who was standing, dumbfounded. "Prosecutor," Nadia commanded, "you have guards. Stop them from pointing at their savior and get them to the methane breather. His suit is failing. Use their environment seals to reinforce his." She was not asking, she was directing. And in the chaos, her authority, the authority of pure, logical competence, was absolute. Then she faced the dais, her eyes finding Ariston Vale. "Arbiter," she called out, her voice ringing with legal fire. "I cite the Emergency Powers Concordance. Article 1. All procedural law is suspended in the face of immediate, verifiable, and cross-species existential threat. And I cite Article 2. Any and all actions taken by any individual to preserve sentient life during such a crisis are granted full and immediate legal immunity." She pointed a finger, not at Rowan, but at Brent Calder. "The crisis is not Mr. Hale. The crisis is the sabotage. I demand the ESB stop threatening the only man saving this chamber and find the man who tried to kill us." She had turned the entire trial on its head. She had used the law itself as a weapon against the law's corruption. At that exact moment, Dr. Helena Park's face reappeared on the main holo display. She was not panicked. She was furious. "Arbiter," she yelled, "Nadia is right. The shutdown was not a system-wide failure. It was a hard line, encrypted override command. It bypassed all safety protocols." "Where did it come from?" Dr. Ariston Vale demanded, his voice a low thunder. "I am tracing it. The signal is masked, routed through 6 proxies. But the origin node, the physical command point. Gods, it is Substation 4 Alpha. On the dry border, Kalen, the ESB prosecutor, went pale. 4 Alpha that is a civilian-run auxiliary station. It only manages irrigation pressure for the peripheral." "Civilian-run," Helena's voice was scathing. "It is leased, the leaseholder. The sole operator of that station's security protocols is listed right here." A new file appeared on the screen, a corporate contract. "The leaseholder," Helena said, her voice dripping with contempt, "is Synoptic Water Energy Consortium." The chamber did not erupt. It went dead silent, the kind of silence that precedes an execution. Brent Calder, who had been screaming accusations, was now a statue. He was trapped. His sabotage, his last desperate move, had been traced back to him in less than 5 minutes. Helena was not finished. "Arbiter, I am activating the external security camera for 4 Alpha. It is on a public ESB feed. It looks like someone is already there." The main screen split. One half showed Rowan, standing in his life-sustaining mist, his face pale but determined. The other half showed a grainy, night vision feed of a remote, dusty substation. Men were running. They were dressed in the same unofficial, modified armor as the poachers from the video. They were carrying data drives, scrambling to a transport vehicle. "They are destroying evidence," Nadia whispered. "They are running." Ariston Vale rose to his full, imposing height. His calm was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. He looked at the ESB guards, who were now standing uselessly in the chamber, their rifles lowered. "Commander," Ariston said to the lead guard, "your prosecutor has been compromised. Your investigation has been a fraud. This council is now in command." He pointed to the screen. "You have a visual on active saboteurs. You have a confirmed location. Dispatch a full containment team. Neutralize that station. Secure those operators. Use of force is authorized. Go now." The Ascender, startled into action, slammed his fist to his chest. "Yes, Arbiter." He and his men did not walk. They ran from the chamber, their shame replaced by the cold focus of a new and just mission. The chamber was stabilizing. Rowan's mist, fed by the re-emerging humidity from the Thrick suits, had created a bubble of survivable air. The automatic emergency seals on the chamber had finally slammed shut, isolating them. But the internal atmosphere was holding, thanks to him. Rowan, his body pushed to its limit, finally staggered. The spore network, its work done, fell from his chest with a wet slap. He dropped to one knee, breathing heavily, utterly spent. Nadia was at his side in an instant, catching him before he fell. She did not say anything. She just put her hand on his shoulder, a small, firm point of contact. Ariston Vale looked down from the dais. The room was a mess. The delegates scattered, the dying revived, the saboteurs exposed. And at the center of it all was the man they had put on trial. "Mr. Rowan Hale," Ariston said, his voice quiet but echoing in the vast room. The Arbiter's gaze was heavy. "This council has heard the testimony. We have seen the evidence." He looked at the dissipating, life-giving mist. "But we have also witnessed an immediate, life-saving action. An act that speaks more clearly to your essential nature than any law or accusation. This council finds your character to be irrefutable." It was over. He had won. He had saved them. Nadia's hand tightened on his shoulder, a surge of triumph and relief passing through her. Rowan looked up, meeting her gaze, a small, exhausted smile touching his lips. "It is not over." The voice was a venomous rasp. Brent Calder was standing, isolated, his guards gone, his reputation in ashes, but his face was lit with a final, desperate, reptilian malice. He had one bullet left. "He saved you, did he?" Brent sneered, his voice cracking. "The brilliant architect, the man who can make rain from his own body. You think he is a hero?" He pointed a shaking finger at Rowan. "Ask him what happened at Blue-Green Anchorage. Ask him who he did not save when his precious system failed. Ask him about the bulkhead door that he designed. Ask him about Rodina Hale." The name hung in the air, a ghost summoned in a room of crystal and steel. Rodina Hale. Brent Calder's accusation was a precision strike, aimed not at the facts of the trial, but at the man. He was shouting, his voice raw with the fury of a cornered animal, feeding on the one piece of leverage he had left. He is a fraud. He talks about saving lives, but his code kills the Blue-Green Anchorage disaster, hundreds dead. Why? Because his precious algorithm failed. A missed valve lock, of his own design, malfunctioned. It trapped them. It trapped his own wife, Rowan, who had been on one knee, supported by Nadia, went utterly still. The strength that had poured out of him to create the mist was gone, leaving a hollow, echoing void. This was the memory that lived beneath his skin, the sound of the bulkhead door sealing, the hiss of the ruptured steam pipe, and Rodina, her hand on the glass, her expression not of terror, but of a terrible, calm understanding. Nadia felt the tremor pass through him, a psychic shock. She looked from Rowan's ashen, haunted face to Brent's triumphant, venomous sneer. "He ran," Brent spat, pointing at Rowan. "He buried himself in the desert so no one would ever ask him. He is not a hero. He is a moral coward, and he is responsible for her death." The chamber was silent. The delegates, who moments before had seen a savior, now saw a man with a dark, unexplained past. Ariston Vale's expression was unreadable, his gaze fixed on Rowan. "That is a lie." The voice was not Nadia's. It was Dr. Helena Parks, crackling with fury from the main holo display. Her face was grim, her eyes boring into Brent. "You dare," Helena said, her voice shaking with rage. "You dare speak her name." "It is the truth," Brent shouted. "Check the public record. His algorithm failed." "The public record was a lie," Nadia said, her voice quiet, but it cut through Brent's shouting like a scalpel. She rose to her feet, her datapad in her hand, her other hand still resting on Rowan's shoulder, as if to anchor him. "When I requested Dr. Park's testimony," Nadia said, addressing Ariston Vale, "she did not just send me data on the fungal mesh. She sent me everything. She has spent the last 10 years of her life trying to access the sealed logs from the Blue-Green Anchorage disaster. After what happened here today, she was granted an emergency override." Helena's face filled the screen. Arbiter. The official inquiry was a sham. It blamed a catastrophic algorithm failure in Rowan's missed regulation code. "But the code was not the problem," Nadia continued. "I have reviewed it. It was perfect. It was designed to auto-seal any sector with a humidity spike over 99% to contain a steam rupture. The algorithm worked. It sent the command to seal the valve." "Then why did it fail?" the ESB prosecutor, Kalin, asked, her voice hushed. She was no longer an adversary. She was a witness. "Because the valve itself was sabotaged," Helena said. "The hardware, not the software." Nadia brought up a new file, a complex schematic, lines of code running alongside a hardware diagnostic. The logs show the algorithm sent the close command, but a secondary, unauthorized override command was sent from the hardware's own internal firmware. It forced the valve to remain open, flooding the residential sector with superheated steam. The system was murdered. Arbiter. It did not fail. The chamber was gripped. This was not just a defense. It was the unearthing of a decade-old crime. "And who?" Ariston Vale asked, his voice a low, cold tone. "Supplied the hardware." "A company called Aqueous Solutions," Helena said, her voice dripping with acid. "A new contractor, brought in at the last minute, overriding Rowan's own preferred suppliers. They provided all the critical valve components." "And who?" Nadia said, her fingers flying across her datapad. "Owned Aqueous Solutions." She traced the corporate lineage on the main screen for the entire chamber to see. A web of shell companies, holding firms, and offshore accounts. It was a complex, tangled knot, and at the center of it, like a spider, was a single, familiar name. "A holding firm," Nadia said, her voice a death knell, "whose primary stakeholder was the Synoptic Water Energy Consortium." Brent Calder made a sound, a low, strangled gasp. "It was you," Rowan whispered, his voice cracking. He finally looked up, his eyes, hollowed by grief, now filling with a terrible, dawning comprehension. "It was always you." Helena's voice was like ice. Blue-Green Anchorage was a public-funded project, a rival. It was designed to create self-sustaining, non-commercial water sources. It was a threat to Brent Calder's entire business model. He did not just compete with it, he sabotaged it. He killed hundreds of people, including Rodina Hale, to protect his monopoly. The full, monstrous scale of Brent's ambition was laid bare. He did not just poach aliens. He did not just sabotage a diplomatic chamber. He was a mass murderer, and he had been for over a decade. Ariston Vale rose. He looked, not at Brent, but at Rowan Hale. The technical blame was gone, but the ghost remained. "Mr. Hale," Ariston said, his voice surprisingly gentle, The council understands. The council sees the truth. Rowan slowly, painfully, got to his feet. He was not looking at Brent. He was not looking at the Arbiter. He was looking at Nadia. His face was a raw map of pain, a wound exposed after 10 years in the dark. "He is right about one thing," Rowan said, his voice rough. "I ran." "Rowan, no," Nadia whispered. "I hid," he said, the words tearing out of him. "I hid in the dust. I told myself it was to honor her, to work the land she loved. But I was hiding. Because I designed the system. It was my name. And I could not. I could not save her. I could not save the one person." He choked on the words. "The one person I loved. I failed. So I buried myself. I swore I would never be responsible for a single life again." He met Nadia's gaze. It was a confession, raw and absolute. He was not the hero they saw. He was the man who had run from the memory of his wife's hand on the glass. Nadia held his gaze, her own eyes bright with unshed tears. She did not look away. She did not offer pity. She just saw him, all of him, and she stayed. The chamber was silent, bearing witness. Ariston Vale nodded slowly. He had seen the man's guilt, and he had seen his redemption. He turned his gaze, now as hard and cold as deep space, to Brent Calder. "Brent Calder," Ariston said. The ESB commander and his guards had returned, their faces grim. "You stand charged before this council, and before the laws of Terra, with conspiracy, systemic industrial sabotage, biopoaching, the murder of Rodina Hale and the crew of Blue-Green Anchorage, and the attempted mass murder of this council and its delegates." He gestured. "Commander, arrest him." The ESB guards moved, their movements sharp, efficient, and fueled by a burning desire to redeem their own compromised honor. They seized Brent, who stood, completely broken, a hollow shell of the man who had entered the chamber. He offered no resistance. "You have no proof," he whispered, a final, pathetic attempt. "We have your men from Substation 4, the commander growled, applying the energy cuffs. "They are singing like birds, trying to save their own skins." As Brent was dragged from the chamber, his last sight was of Rowan Hale, standing not in judgment, but simply standing, alive. The tension broke. The emergency systems of the dais finally, fully, kicked in. The primary humidity generators whined back to life, and the sound of the great waterfalls returned. A rush of life-giving sound. The air grew cool and moist once more. The trial was over. As the delegates began to murmur, the Thrix translator's melodic voice chimed. "Arbiter Vale, the young ones, Sale, Erie, and Toma, request permission to speak, to offer thanks." Ariston nodded. Permission granted. The 3 Thrix teenagers, who had stood silently through the entire, terrifying ordeal, walked forward. They moved past the legal aides, past the guards, and stopped directly in front of Rowan. They were carrying something. It was a long, shimmering ribbon, the color of a pale blue sky after a rainstorm. It looked as though it were woven from condensed mist, and it pulsed with a faint, internal light. Sale, the eldest, held it. He looked up at Rowan and spoke in his trilling, musical language. The translator's voice filled the room. "We have no word for what you did. Hero is a word for warriors. Savior is a word for gods. We have only this." Sale, Erie, and Toma, all 3, reached up. They took the shimmering, moist ribbon and, with a reverence that silenced the entire chamber, they draped it over Rowan's head. It rested on his shoulders, cool and impossibly light. "It is a humidity ribbon," the translator explained, its voice soft. "Woven from the breath of our elders. It is our highest honor. It means, he who shares his water. It means you are family. You are Thrixkin. Rowan stood, stunned, his hand rising to touch the impossible, living gift. He looked at the three children, and for the first time since Rodina's death, the crushing weight in his chest felt lighter. He cleared his throat, his voice thick. He turned to Ariston Vale. "Arbiter," he said, "I have one more request." "Mr. Hale," Ariston said, a small, weary smile on his face. "After today, I believe you could request a small moon." "It is for the poachers," Rowan said. The chamber murmured again. Kalen, the prosecutor, looked at him in disbelief. "The men who were captured," Rowan clarified. "Harsk. The ones at the substation. They are like Brent's equipment. They are tools. They are trapped by economics, by debt. Just as he tried to trap me. They did monstrous things. But they were following a monstrous master." He looked at the arbiter. "I ask for restorative justice. Not just for them. For all the low-level operatives they are rounding up. Leniency. Rehabilitation. In exchange for their full testimony. A testimony that dismantles every last piece of Brent's network. Justice is not enough. Arbiter. Not if it is just revenge. We need repair. Justice should come with a chance to repair." Ariston Vale looked at this man, draped in an alien honor, his face streaked with dust, his past exposed, asking for mercy for his enemies. The arbiter considered this for a long, heavy moment. "Your request is wise," Ariston said finally. "It is the foundation upon which this council was built. It will be so. The tribunal will honor it." The long day was over. The great chamber, wounded but alive, began to empty. Later. The air was cool, and the main lights of the dais were dimmed. Rowan stood on an outer balcony, high above the desert floor. The chamber's emergency seals were open, and the air was a perfect blend of the dais's internal humidity and the clean, cold night of the desert. The stars were brilliant, hard points of diamond light. He was still wearing the Thrix ribbon. It felt like cool water on his skin. The door hissed open, and Nadia joined him. She stood beside him, not speaking, just looking out at the vast, dark expanse. "I am not sure this color suits me," Rowan said, his voice quiet, touching the ribbon. Nadia smiled, a genuine, exhausted smile that reached her eyes. "It is a definite improvement over the dust, and it is significantly better than a prison uniform." They stood in a comfortable silence. "So," Rowan said, "I suppose my water debt is officially cleared." "I think you are in surplus, Mr. Hale," she said softly. "Helena is already petitioning to have your credentials restored. Your real ones. The Institute wants their biosystems architect back." He looked down at his hands, calloused from tools and soil. "I do not know if I am that man anymore." "He is in there," she said. "He just needed a reason to come out." He turned, facing her. "I ran. Nadia. After Rodina. I was not lying. I ran from all of it. I did not want to be responsible for a single thing ever again." "You hid," she corrected him gently. "Until you had to be responsible. You did not run today. You did not even flinch." "You did not let me," he said. "No," she admitted. "I did not." The air between them was charged, not with the frantic energy of the trial, but with a new, quiet potential. He saw the sharp, practical mind that had saved him, and the deep, abiding warmth she had hidden beneath it. She saw the broken, brilliant man who had hidden from the world, and the profound, selfless core he had tried to bury. He was about to speak, to say something. He was not even sure what, when a light flashed above them. It was not an alert. It was not the soft, ambient lighting of the dais. High above, on the inner surface of the great crystalline dome, a series of lights pulsed, a complex, rhythmic sequence, blue-white, sharp, and silent. Nadia looked up, frowning. "What is that? Are the systems still rebooting?" Rowan watched the pattern. His architect's mind, the part of him that saw systems in everything, kicked into gear. He watched the sequence repeat. Long, short, long, long, short. "No," he said, his voice low. "That is not a diagnostic. That is not random." The sequence flashed again, more insistent. "That," Rowan Hale said, "is a message. It is a signal. And it is not coming from inside the dais." The pulsing, silent light on the crystalline dome was not a system reboot. It was a language. Rowan Hale, his architect's mind seeing the pattern in the chaos, watched the sequence repeat. Long, short, short, long. It was elegant, complex, and utterly alien. "It is a summons," a voice said. Rowan and Nadia turned. Arbiter Ariston Vale was standing in the balcony's archway. He was no longer the impassive judge, but a man bearing a great, private weight. "That," Ariston said, his gaze on the pulsing stars, "is an invitation from the ones who truly watch, the ones who built the first treaties, long before our species ever left its cradle. The Hidden Council." "I have never heard of them," Nadia said, her voice a whisper. "That is why they are hidden," Ariston replied. "They do not interfere. They observe. They place pieces on the board and watch the game." "It seems, Mr. Hale, they wish to speak with the piece that just flipped the table." Ariston gestured. A private comm unit, ancient and non-networked, sat on a small table. "The signal is a key. It will unlock this channel. They are waiting. For you." Rowan looked at Nadia. Her face was a mixture of fear and a profound, electric curiosity. She nodded, her hand finding his for a brief second before letting go. "Go." Rowan sat at the console. He entered the sequence of lights as a key, a numerical translation. The screen, once dark, shimmered to life. There was no image. There was only text appearing on the screen, written in perfect, unaccented standard. Rowan Hale, architect, survivor, sanctuary giver. "We have observed." Rowan's hands rested on the keys. His throat was dry. "Who are you?" he typed. "We are the memory of this galaxy. We are the ones who weigh the cost. We are the council that precedes the council. What do you want to understand your action?" The arrival of the Thrix juveniles was not an accident. Rowan's blood went cold. He felt a surge of anger, so profound it nearly choked him. You did that. You used those children. You put them in the desert to be hunted." "No, the poachers were a feral element, a system variable we permitted. The juveniles were a test, an ethical stress test. We seed worlds with these dilemmas, to find connection nuclei, individuals who will act against their own self-preservation, against their own tribal laws. For the sake of another, we find them, we watch them, and we learn." "You tested me," Rowan typed, his fingers slamming the keys. "You risked their lives just to see what I would do." "Their lives were always at risk. We simply steered their fall, and we chose the location. We chose you." "Why me?" Rowan demanded. "Because of what Helena said. Because I was a good engineer." There was a pause. The screen filled with new data. It was not text. It was a file, a log. It was the internal schematic of blue-green Anchorage. But it was not the public record. It was not even the sealed engineering log. It was his personal biometric log, from his life support suit. dated the day of the disaster. Rowan stared, his breath catching. He saw his own heart rate. He saw his suit's integrity. And he saw a command sequence he had never told another living soul. Valve failure. Sector 7. Steam rupture. Catastrophic. Manual override. Rerouting atmospheric moisture from sectors 1, 2, and 3 to ventilation, attempting to create a survivable mist pocket for trapped personnel. And then, the second command, insufficient moisture. Life support detected. Initiating override, sacrifice. Rerouting all personal suit hydration and cooling reserves to Sector 7, mist emitters. He was watching a recording of his own, anonymous, attempted suicide. He had sat at his console, watching Rodina die, and had calmly rerouted his own body's life support, pumping his own hydration into the system to try and save the hundreds of others trapped with her. He had been found hours later by the rescue crews, not just in shock, but in a state of advanced desiccation, his lungs and kidneys failing. He had nearly died. The public record shows a failed algorithm. The text wrote. The saboteur's record shows a broken valve. Ours shows a man who, in his darkest moment, attempted to trade his own life water for that of strangers. You failed, but the choice was made. You, Rowan Hale, were the nucleus. We waited 10 years. We sent the Thrix. We had to know. Would you do it again? Rowan was shaking. It was not just anger now. It was a profound, terrifying awe. He had been seen. In his moment of ultimate failure and deepest, most secret sacrifice. He had been seen by something vast and ancient. You did. You gave them water. You refused to sell them. You built a shield. And then, when your own judges were dying, you used your own body again. You offered yourself as the cure. The test is complete. The verdict is rendered. Rowan leaned back, his mind reeling. He was angry. He was humbled. And he was, for the first time, not alone. He knew, with an absolute certainty, what he had to do next. He typed, I am not your test subject. My species is not your experiment. You say you want to learn. Then your methods have to change. You cannot use real lives as bait. You cannot sit in the dark and permit poachers. That is not observation. That is cowardice. The screen was blank for a full minute. What do you propose? A new covenant, Rowan typed, his fingers steady. You want to find connection nuclei. You want to test us. Then you do it with us. You invite us in. You make us partners in the design. We will help you build the tests. We will ensure the safety protocols. We will not be your lab rats, hiding in a maze. We will be your co-founders. We will be your equals. He held his breath. He had just negotiated with a galactic intelligence he could not even see. This is unprecedented. The observer. As participant, the variable. As co-architect, we accept the co-founders' covenant. We will be in contact. Rowan Hale. The work begins. The screen went dark. Rowan sat there for a long time. He finally let out a breath that felt as though it had been held for 10 years. He stood up and walked back onto the balcony. Nadia was waiting. She did not ask. She just looked at him, her eyes searching his. Rowan Hale, the man who had hidden from the universe, smiled. It was a slow, tired, and absolutely brilliant smile. I need a drink, he said, and I think I just agreed to a new job. I will tell you about it. He looked up at the stars, which seemed, somehow, closer. But first, next time they call, I am going to tell them to give me a heads up. I will brew a bigger pot of tea. The resolution of the Interspecies Treaty Council was swift and decisive. Brent Calder, facing a mountain of evidence from 2 worlds and 2 separate eras, was stripped of all assets, titles, and protections. His trial, held before a combined tribunal of human and Thrix judges, was a formality. His networks were dismantled. The entire Synoptic Water Energy Consortium was broken apart, its infrastructure and patents seized and placed under public, interspecies trust. The age of metered fear was over. Rowan Hale's name was cleared. Not just cleared, but celebrated. The Council, in a formal apology that was broadcast across the planetary feeds, restored his full credentials as a master biosystems architect. They awarded him a living Medal of Honor, shaped from Thrix-grown crystal and Earth-based mycelia, signifying his role in bridging two ecosystems. His first act was not to return to the Institute. It was to return to the desert. Basin Ridge was formally declared a Peaceful Contact Heritage Zone, a protected area under the joint watch of the ISTC and the Thrix Protectorate. The funding that had once poured into Brent's security network was rerouted. A new, state-of-the-art community laboratory and agricultural station was built, right next to Rowan's old shed, Helena Park. Her reputation vindicated, joyfully abandoned her old university post. She arrived with a fleet of volunteers and graduate students from 3 different species, all eager to work under the man who had made mist from his own body. The local economy, once dead, was reborn. It did not boom with industry, but with life. Agrobiology, academic tourism, and ecological restoration became the new currency. Nadia Kim, whose career had been declared suicidal, was offered a director-level position at the ISTC orbital station. She politely, and very publicly, declined. Her superiors, stunned, asked what she wanted instead. She requested a new posting, first diplomatic liaison to the Basin Ridge Heritage Zone. She and Rowan, working with the renewed land, established the Mist Season Camp. It was a school, a retreat, a place where youth from all species human, Thrix, and others could come. They did not just learn science. They learned to restore the soil. They learned to build trust. They learned, from the Thrix, how to weave humidity from the air, and from Rowan, how to find life in the dust. The first learning ambassadors to the camp were, by unanimous request, Sile, Erie, and Toma. They returned, not as victims, but as teachers, telling and retelling the story that had already become a Thrix legend, the tale of the man who lived in the desert, who gave water and asked no price. The nights on Basin Ridge were quiet now, but not silent. There was the sound of young voices, the chime of Thrix song, and the faint, persistent hum of the new, life-giving condensers. On the porch of the new laboratory, which looked out over a valley that was showing, for the first time in a century, a faint, impossible dusting of green. Rowan sat. Nadia joined him, leaning her head against his shoulder. The air was cool, and a light mist, generated by the new growth fungal networks, was settling in the low places. He was holding 2 objects in his hand. One was the small, terracotta red land charm, its edges worn smooth, the shard of a pot Rodina had made. The past, the earth, the memory of a love that had broken him. The other was the Thrix humidity ribbon, which he never took off. It was draped around his neck, a living thing, pulsing with a faint, cool, blue light. The future, the mist, the promise of a love that was healing him. He looked at Nadia, and she smiled, her hand finding his. Rowan Hale, the architect, closed his hand. He held them both together, the charm of the land, and the ribbon of the mist, the past and the future, reconciled at last, here in the desert, under a universe of watching stars.